Continue on from last week. Your homework was to finish the complex payout logic. Wait, is this recording? Yes, I think it is. Okay, why is that? Get out of there. Yeah, it is. Okay. All right, so I did too. I just can't find that file right now. I'm probably accidentally saved over it with the more recent one. All right, so the first thing we want to do is we're going to create a system for tracking an award, the award amount. So your complex logic should have stuck an award up here in the award constant. And we're going to create a system that counts up from 0 to that award so that we can display that on the screen so we see it rolling up instead of just flashing $500 on the screen. And to do that, we're going to use the count chop. Let's take a look at the count chop really quick. Chop count. Okay, so when you put one here, it says there's not enough sources because it needs an input to be able to work. Let's see. So we need to, let's see, count. Yeah, we need to send a 1 or a 0 to it, basically, and it's just like in a chop exec where it needs an off to on. And it does things while on, or it'll do things while on to off, and possibly things while off. We won't use those functions. We're going to just use the off to on and the while on. So for now, let's make a button. Just grab a button and plug the button into the input channel here on this count. Okay, change the button type here to, actually let's just leave it as toggle down for a minute. Okay, now, if I were to, with just the default stuff on the count, if I were to hit the button, you see that it goes to 1. And if I hit it and I turn it off and back on, actually I guess for now let's change this to a momentary. Momentary on the button type. Then make it active and then go ahead and press it. So every time I press it, you can see it's counting. Right? You can use this to, let's go ahead and add a constant. You can use this to track changes in a chop and like count how many times it passes a certain threshold. In our case, we're going to be mostly using it the way I just demonstrated, where 1s or 0s will be coming into it, and every time a 1 comes in, we increment. But you can also use it like on some sort of fluctuating thing where the data could be fluctuating, but every time it goes back to 0 and then goes above 0, it increments the count. So that's a possible use for it, right? And you can change the parameters here on when to trigger. So like right now it's triggering on a threshold of 0, so any value greater than 0 will trigger. But say I wanted it to do any value greater than 0.5, then this doesn't trigger until I get past 0.5. It resets when I go below 0.5. So you could count how many times you went over a certain threshold, and there's many different uses you could use for that kind of function. You can add a delay where it won't re-trigger until a certain amount of time passes to kind of lock out that counting. If you have a value that's hovering close to that, it may trigger like 100 times in a second, and that is not what you want. So you can use a re-trigger delay to keep that. You can also, on the count, you can, where is it? You can change how much it's counting. Let's see. Where is that? I thought it was here somewhere. The increment amount. Does somebody find an increment amount in this?
Limit. Maybe what you're looking for in count.
Limit. Okay. Well, you can definitely do a loop min max and clamp. So right now I have it set to loop. So if this goes to 10, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it goes back down to 0. Okay, there's something here somewhere that does how much it counts each time, but I can't find it. Extend left hold, I don't know. All right, whatever. Oh, I'm on the wrong thing. Here we go. You can reset it by pulsing this reset here. Okay. And trigger on, you can have it trigger on increasing or decreasing values. We're going to leave it on the regular kind of mode. We're going to put this back, trigger threshold back to 0. We don't need a trigger delay. We'll leave it on increasing values. Is this? Yeah. And we don't want any limits for now. Okay. So, yeah. So let's put a. Let's put a null coming off of this button. Okay, and then attach to the count here, and what we're going to do is we're going to say while on, go ahead and turn this off to on to none, and while on, change that to increased count. So now if I hold down the button, it starts counting up really fast, and that's kind of the function we're going to use. And when I let go, it stops. Right? So when I send a 1, it starts counting up. When I send a 0, it stops. Okay? But I found that it counts extremely fast. A little bit too fast to be enjoyable for the amount of awards that we have. Most of our awards are under 100. And if it counts to 100 in like 0.1 seconds, so let's go ahead and reset it really quick. See how long it takes to get to 100. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, that long, right? And so you want an award of 100 coins to feel a little bit more of an accomplishment than that. You don't want to just go done, right? So we want to slow it down somehow. Now there's no method in the count here to change the speed that it counts, unfortunately. So what you have to do is drive it, instead of driving it internally, you drive it by something else. And what do we use? What chop do we use to create a pattern that goes from 0 up to 1 and then back to 0 and up to 1 and back to 0 and up to 1? LFO. You got it. Right. So we can use an LFO here. So let's add an LFO. LFO. Okay. We don't need it to go from -1 to +1, so we could change this to ramp, but then it would go pretty dang slow because it's not going to trigger, well, it's going to trigger every single time that resets back to 0 and then goes above 0, it'll trigger. And really we don't need it to ramp between 0 and 1, we just need it to be sending 0s or 1s, or just sending 1s really. And there's another function on this. There's so many different functions in LFO. It's one of your main objects to use. One of the ones that it uses is pulse. And that makes 0s and then 1s. And you can change the frequency to make it pulse faster. So if I were to, on this count, go back to from off to on and say that is increased count, go ahead and turn off the while on function on the count, and then patch the LFO into this. You can see that it starts counting up. And now it starts counting up at a rate that I can control by adjusting this frequency. So the top of the slider is 8, but I can go past that. So I can go 20. And now you can see this counter counts faster. I can go 40, and it counts even faster. Now what happens if I say 100? It stops. So that's a little bit of an aberrant behavior. I'm not exactly sure. It seems to stop on values less than like 50, or greater than like 50. Let's see, does 50 work?
It quits when it gets to 60 because that's how many frames
Right.
per second.
That's what that would be my guess, is that it has to do with how many frames are a second. The LFO can only do things per frame. So if I change this to 60, it stops. If I change it to 59, it still stopped. Well, it's not going fast anyway. So I found the most reliable and good balance was about 45, because then it'll increase nice and fast, but not too fast, and it has good stability. I guess if you started dropping frames, it might affect your LFO as well. But everything on that previous version that I showed you, the full version, my slot machine is still running at 60 frames a second, so we're doing all right. All right. So we did that. We did that. We did that. All right. So now we need to actually create a system that, when there's an award, turns on this LFO to start counting up. The counter will start counting until it gets to from 0. Start counting from 0 till it gets to the award amount, and then stop. Right? By affecting this play parameter on the LFO. When I turn that on, it counts up. When I turn it off, it stops. So let's see. We have the award here. And this award is getting populated by your complex payout logic over here. And what we can do with this is, if the award is greater than 0, meaning you won something, then go ahead and turn on this LFO. And in fact, let's name this LFO. We're going to call this the count trigger. Count trigger. Count trigger. Okay? Actually, instead of resizing, I should just zoom in a little bit. There we go. Okay? I'm going to move. I'm going to get rid of this button and null. We don't need those. That was just to demonstrate stuff. What? Go away. Delete. Delete. Why won't you delete? Because you're active. There we go. All right. So, I hope I didn't delete something else by accident. I don't think so. Okay, great. All right. So what we're going to do this is, the first thing we need to do is analyze what's coming out of the award, what is in the award field. And if the value changes and the value is greater than 0, then go ahead and turn on the LFO. What do we use to analyze what's inside of a chop and execute code based on that? Chop execute, exactly. So I can right-click on the output here, go over to DATS, and choose chop execute. Or I can just make a chop execute and then specify award as the chop that we're going to be looking at. Okay, and then there are all these different things about, a lot of what we've been doing so far on chop executes are on off to on. This time we're actually going to use on value change, the default. Because we're going to look at any value changing in the award. All right, so what we want to do is, so let's go ahead and zoom in on this, make it active, and on value change, tab over. We're going to look at award and say if the award is greater than 0, then we're going to affect the parameter of that count trigger LFO, right? So let me put the count trigger LFO in the screen here so that it doesn't get confusing for y'all. And I'll just make this a little bit bigger for demonstration purposes. Okay, so we're going to say if space op, open parenthesis, award, close parenthesis, close quote, close parenthesis. Then how do I look at the value? What do I have to look at? You have to specify a channel either by its index or its name, right? And you do that with a bracket. And then I'm going to use name chan1, close bracket. So that will look at the value, and it's if that is greater than 0. Remember, all if statements end with a colon. Go to the next line and tab over. Then we have to, on this count trigger, we want to affect this parameter here on play, right? So you can click the plus and it's called play. Okay, that was obvious. So op, single quote, count trigger, single quote, close parentheses, dot par, right? All the parameters start with dot par and then the name of the parameter, play equals, what should I put? 1, thank you. Okay, great. And then return. So if there's an award here, the count trigger should turn on. Let's go ahead and just force an award, come over here and say 100. Boom, it turns on and the thing starts counting up. Okay? Go ahead and turn it off. Just click on, go back to LFO and click on the play manually and turn it off. Okay, now we need to, what do we need to do? We need to take this and populate it into, oh, I named the, oh no, I didn't. It's called count1. Yeah, okay. So then we want to do, what we want to do is have a chop exec attached to this count1 that looks at the current channel number, the channel value. Right now it's 1605. Let's go ahead and reset that back to 0. Okay, so let's attach a chop exec to this. Okay, and we're going to also have this on value change. And just to make things easier, we're going to define some variables at the top here so that we don't have to keep typing, you know, op count1, chan1, all that stuff. We can just call it count. So make it active. Up here at the top, say we're going to define this variable called count. Count equals op, single open parenthesis, single quote, count1, end quote, close parenthesis, open bracket, single quote, chan1, close bracket. So that will look at that value. We're also going to define, oh, let's go ahead and put an award here. We're going to use award equals op award, close parentheses, open bracket, chan1. That way we don't have to keep typing all that stuff out. And then we're going to have to also keep track of a bank. So like after it's done counting up, we want to take that money that it counted up to and stick it in the bank. So let's go ahead and define bank. We'll use a constant called bank. We'll just go ahead and put the code in it for it now. Bank equals op, we'll call it bank. also chan1. You can copy and paste this stuff if you want. I'm going to type it out so it gives you guys a little bit extra time. But yeah, you could just grab the other stuff and copy and change the text, which might be a little bit faster. And we also need to keep track of what the current count is so that we can reset the counter back to 0 but store what it ended up on to put it in the bank. That's a little confusing, but it'll make a little bit more sense when we actually do this. But for now, let's just go ahead and define this called cur count or current count. Cur count equals same thing, op cur count chan1 Okay, let's make our bank and cur count. These are constants, constant chops. So making a constant, and I'm calling this one bank. I'm going to duplicate that or copy and paste that and change the name to cur count. Okay. What was this for? I don't even remember. Oh, that was just to play around with the thing. We don't need that anymore. Okay, so now when the value changes, we're going to add some code. And the first thing we're going to do is set the cur count to be anything that might be in the bank plus the current plus counts output. So unfortunately we can't I can't use this cur count variable because that's pointing to the channel, and the channel you may or may not remember. If you're going to set a constant value, you have to go to its parameter value 0. If you're going to read the channel's value, you specify the channel. So we could create two different variables for that, but I'm just going to go ahead and specify op cur count. Whoops, the wrong cur count dot par dot value 0 equals, and then I can use my variables now and just say count plus bank. Okay, because we defined count and bank up here. So it's going to look at the value in channel 1 of bank, and it's going to look at the value in channel 1 in count, add those together, and stick it in cur count. Okay, and then we need to compare count if count equals award colon. So we're going to take a look at count and compare it to the award amount, and if the current count that the counter is counting up to equals the award, then we need to stop. So if count equals award, tab over, and now we need to, the main thing we need to do is our count trigger play parameter, we need to set that to 0. So op count trigger dot par dot play equals 0 to stop it. And then what else? What do we need to do after we stop it? We need to then update the bank. So I would say op bank dot par dot value 0 equals cur count. Okay, and then what else do we need to do? Then we need to reset the counter back to 0 because the award isn't going to increment each time. The award, if you get $20 this time and you get $50 the next time, it's going to be either a 20 or a 50. It's not going to be a 70. So we have to reset the counter back to 0 so that we can count up to 50, right? So we need to reset the counter. How do we reset the counter? It was here on count, here on the count tab of the count chop. It's this reset pulse. Anything that has a reset with a button, or any button next to it for that matter that says pulse, there's a specific command you can use to push that button. And first you got to know what the parameter is called. The parameter is called reset pulse. And then the specific function is pulse, open parenthesis, close parenthesis. So let's take a look at what that would look like. Op count one, whoops, don't forget my quotes. Count one dot par dot reset pulse. And here's the thing that I was talking about, pulse, open, close parenthesis. That will pulse that reset back to 0. So once the count equals the award, we stop the count trigger. We take whatever is in the current count and stick it in the bank, and then we reset the counter back to 0. And then let's see. And then we want to, because we're changing this chop execute based on a value change, we want to set the award back to 0. Most of the time you wouldn't need to do that because you're not very likely to win 2 awards in a row, right? But if you happen to win 2 awards at the same level in a row, like 2 jackpots in a row, God forbid, then it's going to be 500 in there, and then it will still be 500 in there, and there is no value change, so it won't do anything, and it won't count up to 1,000. So we need to reset it back to 0 so that when you get another $500, there's actually a value change there to trigger our chop execute here based on the value change. So let's set that back to 0. So op award dot par dot value 0 equals 0. All right, let's try this out. If we did this right, we should be able to trigger a count. Make sure that your cur count and your bank are set at 0 and that your count is reset and back down to 0. Your count trigger should be off. And go ahead on the award here, put in something different. Put in, I don't know, don't put in something super high because then you'll be sitting there waiting for it to count up to that. Let's do something like 30. And you can see it starts counting up, and as soon as it gets to 30, it stops. And then sticks it in the bank, right? Let's look at that again. Go ahead and reset these values. I'm going to put this back to 0. I'm going to take my cur count, put it back to 0. And now on the award, all I have to do is put something in the award to make this work. So award, let's put in 100. Boom. So what happens? When there's a value change, this chop execute does its thing because we told it to do things on value change. And what does it do? If there's a value change greater than 0, because we don't want it to do this when we're just resetting it to 0, right? If there's a value change greater than 0, then start that count trigger to count. That count trigger here turns to 1. That causes the count here to actually do its thing. When the count starts doing its thing, then values are changing on this second chop execute, and so then it's looking at what is there. Each time a number changes, it looks at the number and says, is this number equal the award amount? If not, then don't do anything. Then actually, every single time, in every single count, go ahead and update the cur count with whatever was in the bank plus the amount that the counter is counting to. So you're increasing that current count. And then when the count equals the award, then turn off the count trigger, update the bank with the current count, and then reset your counter and reset your award. So that's what's happening there. So does that make sense to you guys? I know it's a lot to process, but we have a lot to cover. Do you have any questions on this before I move on? Is that working for y'all? What's up, Shay?
What's the difference between, I'm in your Python and chop exec 3, or no, it'll be 2 for you. What's the difference?
Oh, let's go ahead and name this so that we can speak the same language. It doesn't matter because we don't reference this anywhere else, but I called it money counter. Okay.
What's the difference between the language that you use at the top, specifically when you say op, open parentheses, name, close parentheses, open bracket, name, close bracket, and then at the bottom when you do op, open parentheses, name, close parentheses, dot par, dot value 0.
Yeah, like I said, the difference is one of those can read a value, the other can set a value. I can't reference channel 1 the way I do at the top here. Chan 1, I can't reference that and say chan 1 equals 5. It just won't work.
Okay.
You have to say its parameter value 0 equals 5. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So so if I wanted to make this code a little bit cleaner, which I just didn't do, and so I didn't get in my notes, so I didn't do it today. But if I wanted to stay with this paradigm of defining everything, all of this messy code as a clean single word variable, I could say something like, what am I setting? The bank or whatever. I could say, I don't know, set bank equals, and then this op bank par value 0 equals set bank, or set bank equals op bank par dot value 0, and then I could just say set bank equals cur count and not have to type all that out. But I didn't. It's not in my notes, so I didn't do it that way. But does that make sense? So like you have to reference the parameter value 0 if you're going to change the number with code. If you're going to read the value, then you need to reference the channel, which is in brackets. Okay? It's a Python thing. Okay. So we should have a system now. Let's go ahead and test this out. So we're going to force this to do what we want. Force this to be a winning combination. And there's a couple ways. There's 2 ways I can think of to do that. One probably annoying way would be to go in your complex payout here, and instead of referencing math 1 chan 1, math 1 chan 2, and math 1 chan 3 on each of these wheels, I could change it to the logic test thing over here, and then I could set these logic test things to be 777, and that would work. But a quick and dirty way of doing this is just make 3 constants over here. Copy, paste. I'm going to put them side by side. So I'm going to take these 3 constants, and I'm going to plug the first one into the wheel post constant here, which will force it to be whatever I set. So I'm forcing this wheel post 1, wheel post 2, wheel post 3 to be the number that I have here, right? So then let's go ahead and actually just leave them as 3 zeros for now. And then just to make the thing operate, go ahead and hit the button. It's still going to take the same amount of time as it would have taken if the wheels were spinning, but the wheels won't spin. If I take a look at this, you can see the wheels are not spinning, but it's set to 3 bars. And then when it's done, you should see the award pop in there. Boom, 200. And so now it starts counting up to 200. $70, $80, $90, $200, boom, and stops. And then sets that to the bank. And so now we had 100 in the bank, and we added 200 to the bank, and so now there's 300 in the bank. Okay, let's go ahead and set this to something small just to test this out. So now here, instead of 0, 0, 0, change this to 1, 1, 1, which is 3 cherries, which is a fairly small award. And you can see it changes it to cherries here. And now push the button either on your graphic or down here on the button operator. And we have to wait for it to spin even though the wheels aren't spinning. And you'll see when it's done, you'll see the spin complete pop from 0 to 1. Boom. And now it gave us an award of, I should have scrolled over. It gave us an award of, so it reset it back to 0. It gave us an award, no, it didn't do anything. Why? Sometimes, I don't know. Let's try that again. Spin complete. Oh, I know why. It should work on your guys's. I couldn't find the version where I finished my complex payout, and that I didn't get to that point in my thing. So actually, you know what I can do? Let me just save this really quick, and I'll just grab the complex payout from the other thing and replace it in here really quick. That will save us more headache. You guys don't need to worry about this. Just give me 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes. Let me save this for today's class. I will call it save as Slot Machine 3 class. Let's not keep putting things on the desktop. All right, and open recent, Slot Machine. Oh, great. It just saved over my main one, but I have it here on 3.9, I believe. Yeah, I do. Got it back. All right. Yeah, that's all there. That's all there. Okay, great. Let me just grab this code here. Copy. Let me save this again. Open. Recent. Yeah. All right. Now, before I do anything, let's fix this. Documents. Touch. And let me save it as something different so I don't get messed up. All right. So let me just replace my complex payout here. There we go. So now that should, on 111, should work on mine. So I have 300 in the bank. When this award pops to something small here. Oh, what's now? What did I do? It's probably some extra code that is referencing sound stuff that I need to comment out. 1 second. probably fix that. Let's try it one more time. It was referencing objects that I didn't have in my patch, is what caused it to break. There we go, 15, it worked, and now I have 315. All right, so is that working for you guys? If you force win, you'll see your counter count up, yes? Great. All right. Cool. Does anybody not understand what's happening here? Okay, great. I'm going to take your silence as assent. All right, so moving right along. Next thing, now we have a system that counts up. Now we need to actually print this out so we see it on the screen. We need to create some text to put on the screen. So we can, of course, we're going to be using the text, what is it called? Top. Right? But text top wants to be part of a two-dimensional top chain. So like my first inclination was to put it here after render before output, like this. But that sticks it here, and it actually makes it a little bit difficult to deal with because I'd have to like move it in just the right position, and there's a lot of rendering things that we'd have to deal with. And really the way we want to handle it is the same way we handled the wheels, which was, go ahead and take a look at your wheels, go back inside your wheels. Before we did these symbols, which are also a top, right? You can think of text as just generating a picture like you would load from your hard drive, right? So we loaded these slot symbols in here. But before we did that, we created our own with these text. Was that a picture? Yeah, it was text. And then we like rotated it 90 degrees and so forth. But as you can see here, the paradigm is you start with the two-dimensional top texture operator, and then we flipped it sideways in our case, and then you apply it to a material, right? So from slot symbols to the flip, and from flip to the Fong1 material. And then we map it to a SOP, a surface operator, a three-dimensional object. So what we're going to do is the same thing. Instead of like sticking text on our master display here, go ahead and just delete that text. Get rid of that. Have it go from render straight to the output the way it was before. We're going to map that text to a SOP that we can position in place. So create a SOP, a rectangle SOP. Okay. And let's see. We need a text now. A text top. Whoops, I clicked on the wrong thing. Text. Okay. And we need to send that to a material. A mat, a Fong mat. Okay, and let's see, how do I do that? You drag this onto this, and you say param, map that to the color map. Okay? Now, for the rectangle to actually receive that, we need to add a material SOP. This is just the same stuff that we did in our wheels. Then on the material, what do I have to do to make the material SOP reference this Fong1 up here? Anybody? There's only one parameter in the material SOP. What do you think I put in this parameter? Fong1. I could type it in, or you can actually just drag it in here like that. and that works too. And so now I have a black background with white text on an object that I can render in my scene. I'm not currently rendering it in my scene. And why is that? Well, the render flag's not turned on. If I do that, then it does this, which isn't really what we want to do. What we actually want to do is the same thing that we did it with our wheels and every other piece of geometry in our patch so far, and that is stick it inside of a geometry component. So let's stick all of this, your text, your rectangle, your fong, and your material. I'm just going to cut those. I'm going to create a geometry component and go inside here. By default, it gives you a torus. We don't want the torus. Paste in that stuff that we just cut. And so now we have, oh, you have nothing when you zoom out. Why? It's the same thing. You have to have your render and display flags turned on. Let's send this to a null, actually, going out of the material. That way, if we decide we want to put some sort of effect in between these two, we can. And here on the null, go ahead and turn on your render and your display. And now we have a black derivative square. Instead of it overwriting this thing and making it transparent, it is just another item in the scene, right? So now we need to adjust this square to be a little bit, to be the right size. And I'm going to put it where I currently have my Lucky 7 slot machine, and I'm going to move the Lucky 7 slot machine down on the slot machine down to here. Down to this area right here. So let's do that. Let's see. First of all, let's turn off rendering on this just to get rid of it for a minute. I'm on the geometry that we just created with the text. Let's go ahead and name that just so we don't get confused. Call this, just call it text. Doesn't matter what you call it. We're not going to actually reference it. Wait, what happened? Maybe it does matter. Why did it disappear from the scene? And then now it's doing the same sort of like, son of a gun. Let me just try this again. All right, go back inside that geometry component. If you named it text, that's fine. And select everything in it. And copy or cut. And let's just dump that now and make a new one. New geometry component. Not sure what happened there, but I think I can fix it just by redoing it. Go back inside it, get rid of your torus, and paste it. Okay, and then make sure your render and display flags are turned on at the end of your SOP chain here. All right, that's back to, no, it's not. What the heck? What did I do wrong? That's really weird. Shoot, what did I do? Maybe if I get rid of my render. No, that didn't do it. Pickable? I don't know. Is your guys doing the same thing? Okay. Let's see if I can fix that somehow. Oh. What's going on? Throw a curveball at me. And if I go into this, oh, it's black again. Well, let's just try moving it, resizing it and moving it. Although I have a feeling this isn't going to go well. All right, well, first thing is I want to go back in it, and I want to change this rectangle size to be something a little bit different. I believe I had it as like a 2 to 1 on its size here. So it's twice as wide as it is tall. You want to change the text's the resolution of the text to something a little different. What did I have before? I don't know. Let's see. Something like, let's try 100 by 50. And then on the text here, font size, bring that down to like 14. Okay. Yeah, that is really weird. Now on the geometry, I can scale this to fit where I want in the scene. So on the geometry here, I'm going to scale this. Let's see. I just want to drag it. It's really weird that I can't get it the size I want anymore. I don't know what's with that alpha problem, but whatever. So 0.2, 0.2, that shouldn't matter. The Z scale shouldn't matter because it doesn't have any Z depth. And now we want to translate it to move it up. Whoops, not by 1. Let me go back to 0 here. I want to use my value ladder on a 0.01 and start dragging that up. So I'm sticking this in the middle here. Translate over a little bit. Now I can adjust my scale on the X to make it fit. Let's try a smaller increment on the value ladder. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, I need to move that the Lucky 7 slot machine down. So let me just try moving the Y first. Oops, that's up. You'll notice though that I got to move it forward in the Z scale. So because what happens is it starts ending up being below this geometry. So we need to move it forward. Like that, and then move it down. Didn't move it far enough forward yet. Oh, I'm close actually. All right, and now rescale this to kind of fit in that area. So I'm trying to get those little lines as a guide where to stick this. Let's try translating it over a little bit. All right, I want to scale it a little bit less on the X. A little bit less on the Y. I'm going to adjust the Z until it starts to disappear, and then I'll back up from there. Oh, why? Oh, I can't get it to go away now. There we go. 0.1. .09. It's really weird. I'm trying to get it to go just in front of this. Why does that keep hopping from from 0 to point whatever. Let's put it at 0 first. Okay. I'll just have it at 0, I guess. All right, so that's all right for that. I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's just making this look nice. We have our text. It looks a little funky here, but I think it'll look okay in the actual view. It looks okay. Yeah. Maybe I want to change it's a little bit low resolution. I can change the resolution of the text and make this a little sharper. Let's try that. So I'm going to go back into the geometry here, and on this text, on the resolution, let's put this back to, let's put it at 200 by 100, I guess. Yeah, that looks a little better. And you can adjust the font size to make the text bigger or smaller. So if you make it higher resolution with a bigger font size, you can make the text a little sharper. If I make it a lower resolution and I lower the text size down, I can make it take up the same amount of space, but it's lower res. So why would you want to have a lower resolution? It would probably be for performance sake, right? All right, so now what we want to do on this text, I still don't know why we have this alpha issue. It wasn't that way when I built it, and then I did something and I wrecked it. I think all I did was change the name of this geometry to be called text, and for some reason that messed it up. Is it going to do it? Well, it's already messed up. Text. Yeah, it doesn't matter. Okay. Is there any alpha in this? Maybe that's all I have to do. Go back inside it real quick, and here on text 2, I believe you can set here background alpha, background color. By default, that background color is black. Turn the alpha up to 1 on the background alpha. Maybe that'll fix it. Yeah, that fixes it. All right. Well, that's one way of fixing it. I went here on text and set its background color to black, which it is by default, and then turn the alpha from 0 up to 1. So now there's no transparent pixels in this text. I didn't think that would matter because the Fong usually does that for us, where whatever isn't transparent on the color map is black, or whatever is transparent on the color map is black, but for whatever reason I had to do it this time. All right, so great, we have derivative. Now what we need to see instead of derivative is the bank, right? So let's try this out. Let's go into, let's wake up and talking to you, Gabe. It's all right. I know you've been working hard on Antigone. It's kicking your guys' butt. Yeah, you guys been coming in as early as I've been coming in, but you're staying a lot later. All right, so what was I doing? Oh, right. We need to change what the text is displaying. So, right, by default, it's displaying the word derivative. But as you may recall, you can use Python to set the text based on another operator. So what do you think? What operator should we be looking at to set this text? Bank. Yeah. Well, we could definitely use bank, but what happens when the bank actually doesn't count up? The bank only gets like set to the bank value. So we actually want to reference, what is it? Cur count. Hold on, let me look. Plan, spin, that's sound stuff, text. Is it cur count? maybe it's cur count. Let's see. I did in my notes. I think I ended up doing the same thing as what cur count is. I ended up saying bank plus count 1, which I think is the same as cur count. So I might just do cur count, because let's just try this real quick. I'm going to give myself another award. I'm at 315. When that goes to award of 15 here, boom. Yeah, let's just try referencing cur count instead of the complex code that I have in my notes. I think that'll work fine. All right, so here on text 2, we're going to reference, instead of derivative, we're going to reference cur count. So I hit the plus to expose the variables. You click on the blue, and it immediately breaks it because it doesn't know what derivative is. If I wanted this to actually be the word derivative, I could put single quotes around it, and then that will restore it. But we don't want to do that. We want to point to op, open parenthesis. How do I point to an op outside of this component? Yes, .. cur count. It still needs to be inside of, I forgot, it still needs to be inside of quotes. Even the .. needs to be inside those single quotes. Okay, cur count. And then I believe you would do chan 1. Chan 1. And you should see a number, 330.0. That's a little annoying. What's with that 0.0? Well, Python works pretty much exclusively in, well, not exclusively, but by default, if you don't specify, it wants to work in floating point values. And because we're not, the cur count is actually a number, it's casting that number as a floating point value. So we need to recast it as an int to chop off that decimal point. Which all you need to do that is say, instead of this, you want to keep all this code, but say I want this as an int, and then put all of what you put before in parentheses. And so now it's casting that value as an int. And when you cast a floating point value as an int, all it does is chop off the decimal points. Okay, so now it says 330. Let's go ahead and test out seeing this with our button. My button. So I'm hitting my button. I still have to wait for the thing to stop spinning, even though it's not going to spin. And then when it supposedly would stop spinning, you'll see that count up. And that's exactly what we want. Great. Okay, I think I remember why I did bank plus count, but I'm going to leave it the way it is for now. And it had to do with when we subtract 1 when we hit the lever. But for now, let's leave it. And we want to add the word bank before this. So it's actually pretty easy. All we need to do is, you can chain together as many text operators as you want. This one is going to be referencing this cur count chan 1, but we can put one before it that just has a specified word called bank. So whoops, I clicked on the wrong thing. Text. So if I chain these together, I get probably derivative plus text. Oh boy, now I have the issue with the background stuff. I guess here on text 2, let's turn the background back off. Otherwise you won't see that derivative. And we want to have the first thing in the chain have the background. So here, derivative, let's turn the background alpha up on that one. So now we see derivative, and we see the number here below it. So is this where I set the resolution? 200 by 100. We want the first thing in the chain to actually set that resolution as well, otherwise it'll override it. 200 by 100. There we go. All right, now instead of saying derivative, we want to change that to the word bank, colon. And let's change the font size a lot smaller. We can actually have it be smaller than our number. And then what would we want to do if we wanted to push this bank over to the left? Anybody know? It's going to be in here somewhere. Position, yeah. Down here. So by default, this does pixels, which works, but you have to increment quite a bit to see anything. So I'm doing the ladder by 10 pixels. -50, that's about right. Cool. Let's push this up to the top because we're going to push both of these up to the top because we're going to want room underneath it to do those buttons that I want to be part of your homework. So go ahead here on position on the Y. Push that up to the top. And then here on the text 2 position, push that up to the top as well. Great. Cool. All right, that's working for the most part. Now, sound. It's 2:30. Cranking right along. I think we might barely get to the point cloud stuff. Maybe not enough. I went ahead and uploaded the entire point cloud patch, so we can just download that, grab the code, and stick it in here, and I can explain how it works because we probably won't have time to build it from scratch. But for now, we're going to need some sounds. So go to the website and download the sounds that I put in the week 7 or week 8. Where are we? Week 8. Did I put it in the right place? Yes. Download. Go ahead and download coin particles as well. But download slot machine content is the one we're going to be working with right now. Okay, then unzip your slot machine content. I already did it on mine. It's going to be in downloads, slot machine content. And in there you should see coin win, end spin, and spin wave. Looks like maybe mine had a little more than that, but you guys should at least have those files in there, right? Yeah. So grab and drag coin win and end spin and spin wave. All right, and put them someplace convenient in your patch. I'm going to put mine over here. And it probably would make most sense to put spin on top with end spin underneath it and coin win. It doesn't really matter though. So as you can see, when you drag an audio file into TouchDesigner, it creates a chop because sounds are chops in TouchDesigner. It's a little counterintuitive, but you can think of chops as a fluctuating signal, which is also what sound is a fluctuating signal. So, but you don't hear anything. You don't hear anything because you need something else to complete this. Actually, this charger is working great. I'm at 98%. That's great. All right. Okay, so we need to, in order to hear something, we need a, I believe it's an audio device out chop, which really isn't a chop. But they wanted it to be in the same family. And so then you can leave the driver probably as default. If you had some other, like a Motu or something, you might need to specify the Motu's driver there. And the device, if you had more than one output, in my case, I have the HDMI cord as a second output. But you guys probably just have the one output, so you could probably just leave it as default. And then go ahead, this is going to sound really annoying, but go ahead and connect the spin to the channel output, the first input, source on the device out. And you'll hear it do its thing. To turn it off, so go ahead and do that. See if you can make it play sound. To turn it off, go back to the audio in and turn the play to off. Yeah? Is everybody able to make sound? Yes? Okay. Okay, so what we need to do, obviously, and so go ahead and turn it off by hitting this play off. The end, let's see, we're going to need a channel audio device out for each thing. It won't let you patch, double patch. So you need to have one for each sound, which I find a little annoying, but that's the way it works. Go ahead on end spin, turn that off, and patch up the coin win, and turn that off. Okay, so some of these sounds we want to loop, and some of them we don't. We want the spin to loop this thing. We want that to loop. We don't want end spin to loop. So here under play mode, sequential, turn that to no, sorry, leave the play mode alone. It's repeat down here. Repeat, turn that to off. Okay, so now go ahead and turn play on this one. And you see it's not doing anything because it already ran through and stopped. So how do you get it to play again? You click on the reload. And when we want it to play in our patch, we'll want to specify the pulse on reload. All right? This is all the reason why the sounds all play when you first run the patch is because you had the plays on. And so they'll play once and then they'll stop. You could set that to off and then in your code, before pulsing it, turn it on, pulse it, and turn it off. I don't mind just letting them play that one time. It's really, I mean, if you're going to do it the right way, that'd be the way to do it. Maybe we'll just do it that way here in a minute. But for now, just go ahead and make sure the play is on that one. Okay, and then on these ones that are repeating, which is going to be coin win and spin. We want them to be repeat set to on and play set to off. Okay, let's see. The coin win. Go ahead and play this sound. You'll hear that it doesn't loop perfectly. It has that hiccup, right? So we want to get rid of that hiccup. And we could go in with a DAW, with a digital audio workstation application like Pro Tools, or if you want a free one, what's it, Audacity. You could go in and clip that out so that it loops perfectly. And if you're going to design your game from scratch and professionally, you might want to do that. But for our purposes, we can do it quick and dirty by just adjusting the so I'm on coin win. We want to adjust the trim here from turning on trim and on the trim end. So if you go ahead and hit play on this, right now it's playing from 0 to 1 second. This is like a 3 second and some change file. So, oh boy, yeah. So change this to like 3 seconds. And it loops fairly well then. So just change that to trim end at 3 seconds. Okay, then go ahead and turn it off. Okay. So now, how do we execute these spin sounds? Well, let's see. We need something to happen on this. We want this sound to play, which actually I didn't like the. I thought this. I didn't like the tonality of this particular sound, and I thought it sounded better if you just slowed it down a little bit on the speed here, where it's set to 1. Change that to like 0.75 or 0.76 or something, and I like that better. It's a little softer, and it kind of matches the speed of the wheels a little bit better, in my opinion. If you guys want to, in your homework, replace these sounds with something that you like better, by all means, do it. So we want this to turn on when we hit the button. So what could I do to do that? I have to change a parameter. I have to execute a parameter change based on input coming from a button, which throws a 0 or a 1. Same thing we've been doing all day, chop execute, right? The only thing about chop executes, though, if you try to drive them from a button, it doesn't work right because you have to reference a chop, and a button is actually a component. So you have to have a null coming out of the button, and then you reference that null in your chop execute. So I'm going to, on the output of this, I'm going to do a chop execute, which creates that association automatically for me. And we're going to do an off to on. We're going to turn off value change. We're not going to use that one. So when on to on, off to on, go ahead and make this active so you can add code to it. Off to on, we are going to we're going to do the op spin, I think it's called, with a capital S, dot par. What is it? I think it's play. Let's take a look. So here's spin. This is what we're talking about. And if I look at this, I'm wanting to affect this parameter here called play. If I pull it down, it's called play. So I can say dot par dot play equals 1. So when I go ahead and try it out really quick, when I set this, it turns on the sound. Go ahead and turn off the sound manually. Okay, and then what else? Then I also put some code in the same thing that subtracts $1 from the bank if the bank has any money in it. So we can, in my notes, I went ahead and did the definition here. I said bank equals op bank, bank chan1 and then I say go ahead and do that, and I say if bank equals, sorry, no, it's greater than 0. If bank's greater than 0, then op. This is now I have to specify the bank thing. I'm going to grab this text from up here. Op bank dot par dot value 0. It's kind of annoying. I wish you could just specify the channel and just tell it, and then you could use the same reference. Value 0 equals bank minus 1. So that should subtract $1 from the bank if there's anything in the bank. Right now, there's nothing there that's going to prevent you from playing if there's no money in the bank. That's going to be your homework to add. Okay, so that should be, so that should work. The only thing that I have extra in my notes, and it may not be that necessary. This sound file is so short that you probably wouldn't notice, but it's going to pick up wherever it left off in its loop. So if you're halfway through the loop, it's going to start halfway through the loop. And so before playing, I want to reset back to 0 of the loop. So all you have to do is, before I say op spin par play equals 1, I want to actually say grab this stuff, op spin dot par, what is it? Reload, the reload. If I click on this and I extend the reload here, it says reload pulse is the parameter. So par reload pulse, and then to pulse something, to actually click this reload button, I have to say dot pulse open close parenthesis. And so that will, before it turns it on, it will reload it back to 0 and then turn it on. Okay, so that should work. Let's just try it real quick. Yep, that works. But it's not going to turn off yet. So we need to add some code to turn it off. So where could we do that? We want it to spin until the end of the last wheel turning. And we already have a chop exec that executes on that last wheel turning, and that's our complex payout chop exec here, right? So all we need to do is add some code in here. So this is let me rebuild this in front of you guys. We're going to add this code here. So we're going to stop the spin sound. You don't have to put this comment. I'm just putting it here because it makes it a little more obvious what's going on. And we're going to op spin dot par dot play equals 0. So that'll stop it. And then we want to play that end spin sound. So play end spin sound. And to play that end spin sound, we want to, here on end spin, we just want to pulse this reload, right? So play end spin sound, I'm going to say op, I believe it's called capital END underscore capital SPIN, end spin dot par dot, same thing as before, reload pulse dot pulse open close parenthesis. So that should, at the end of the spin, play that sound. So let's go ahead and try that out. So we still have our wheels hooked up to this stuff up here, so they're not going to spin, but it should still do what it's supposed to do at some point, which is stop it and then play that song. So then if you think that that's too loud, the end spin sound, which it kind of is, you can, here under audio device out, the volume, you can bring that down. So now it won't play as loud. right? All right, so that's most of it. The only thing left is this coin win stuff, which we can add to. We want the coins to be spitting out when the money counter does its stuff. So we can add it to the money counter code over here. So we have here on value change, we have these things down here. We can add another op here, op coin win dot par dot play equals we actually want it to. This is what happens when it gets to the award and stops. We want it to actually stop that play, but we want to before that. Yeah, up here at the top. Go ahead and copy the code that you just made here, and put it here underneath this count plus bank, and change that to 1. So then, when this thing operates, it'll turn that on. When it gets to the award, it'll turn it off. Let's go ahead and try that out. Make sure you still have your wheels overridden by numbers up here, and click your button, and you should get the whole enchilada. And then it stops when the award is completed, right? So if I wanted to now hook this back up to the way it should be, all I have to do is on the outputs of these spinners, connect those back to the wheel posts. And that should now make the thing operate the way you intended. But you probably won't win because it's really hard to win on this thing. Even with all the extra win conditions, it's still like I hit it for like 5 minutes and couldn't get a single win. Cool. All right. So last thing, we have 7 minutes. I want to load in. Go ahead and save this. And open up the other file that you downloaded, the coin particle stuff. What did I call it? Coin particles or something? Yeah, coin particles. Come on, Touch. You can do it. There we go. So what we're going to end up with is this over here. When you have an award, when that money counter actually starts rolling, this will get enabled. And let me try to, in 5 minutes, explain how this works, how particle systems work in Touch. So the main thing to know about a particle system, and it's a little bit different in Touch than other ones you may or may not have ever worked with before, is that particles want to come out of a piece of geometry. You can't just say, give me particles here. You have to say, give me particles in this shape. And that shape is contained here. So in my case, I wanted the particles to be spawned in like a little slot, in the coin slot. And so they are spawned up here, right here. And then there's forces acting on these. There's forces acting on these particles that pull them down. So let's take a look at what I'm doing here. So I start with a grid. I may have been able to use, instead of a grid, you might have been able to use a rectangle. You might have even been able to use a line, but I was trying a bunch of different shapes, and I just did it with this grid. And then I took the grid and I squashed it with a transform. And so I squashed it. Its scale is 0.01 in the Y. And then you patch that into, let me remove this sort from the thing for a minute. You patch that into the particle system and you get particles. And if I change the, let's see, where's my forces? All right, great, I just have a -1 here. So by default, this force would be at 0, and those particles would just spread out from that geometry. But I wanted them to fall, so you go to forces and you apply a force to the y, and I did -1 so that they fall. But these particles are spawned based on the points on the source geometry, and it iterates through those points of the source geometry incrementally by default. So in order to get a more so you end up with these like cascading waves as it's iterating through the different points. So to get a more randomized assortment, you can sort these with a sort SOP, and under your sort SOP, you can change the point source from, by default it's at no change. You can change that to random. And then it will just randomly go to the various points in that source. And then that gives you more of this shower effect. Okay? Now, you could just render these dots on the screen, but instead I wanted it to be coins. So in order for me to do that, I had to first extract the coordinates of the coins to a SOP to chop, and that gives you these coordinates. I then sent that to a null, just out of habit. And then what I wanted to do is then I have coordinates that I could send to instancing on a geometry component. Remember we did this back in Valentine's Day with the hearts? We had the instancing of the hearts, and you can map the translate X, Y, and Z to have multiple versions of that, right? Let's see here. On the instancing, let me put the original. Instead of merge, I'm going to put this back to the way it was originally. Null 1. So you get this by default, which all your coins are facing the same way. I could rotate those so that they're facing me, but then they would just look very two-dimensional. But what I wanted them to do was flip over as they're falling. So I wanted to create a rotational vector. And so to do that, I had to add it. You can only, when you're doing instancing, you can only reference one chop, dat, or SOP for your instancing. So I merged these together using this merge. I created a LFO here to do the rotation. And you can see I have a LFO that goes between 0 with an amplitude of 360. So it counts from 0 to 360. And I have that doing on a frequency of 1.5. I merged that with the output of our SOP2 here to a merge. And then there was something a little bit different here, and that's the align. If you leave it on automatic, it does this thing and it doesn't work. Let me put this back to merge. It does this, which totally looks like crap. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on. I think what's going on is that these have different periods. All I know is I just started playing around with this align, and I found that if you say, what did I have it on before? Shift to maximum, that it made this look more like this, and then it worked the way I expected. So I'm not 100% sure what this align does, but what I think it does, my guess is that it conforms the data coming out of this to the data coming out of this, so that this bar graph, so that they're speaking the same language, the same intervals. Because you can see these values down here counting over. So it would be when it got above, see, these only go to 100, and this down here is going to like 360, and so when it got to 360, got above 100, it would confuse the merge and mess up the data. And so changing this shift to maximum shifts the values coming out of this null to match the indexes coming out of the rotational LFO there. That's my best guess at what's going on. I just don't know for sure, but it seemed to make it work. And so then it applies that. And so then when you're here on your instancing, you have to make sure you plug in translate X, translate Y, translate Z, and then you can also plug in a rotational vector. I chose to put it around the X rotation so it flips the way a coin generally flips when you drop it. The one thing I couldn't do or figure out how to do, and if you figure out how to do it, I'll give you uber mega extra credit, is make each one of these have a slightly offset rotation from the other. Right now, every single coin flips exactly the same way at the same time, which kind of creates this thing where they get brighter and dimmer and brighter and dimmer and brighter and dimmer as they're flipping around. So I would have rather had like some of the coins be in different parts of their rotation. I just couldn't figure out how to do it. So anyway, that's that. And if you're going to put that in your patch, the way you would turn things on and off is here under the particle particles. How many particles are on the screen is controlled by birth here. How many are being birthed? If I send that, so particles have a lifespan. They're birthed, they're affected by forces, and they have a lifespan after which they die and go away. So if you set the birth rate down to 0, they just stop. So you can, in your code, you can set that birth to 0 when the money counter gets to where it needs to go. It can set the birth to 0, and those coins will stop. So 15 or so I found was a good thing, was like around 15 seemed to be a good amount of coins without being too many. The other thing is how long they are on the screen, how far they fall is determinant of their life expectation. So if I wanted these to fall further, I could set their life expectation from 4. What's the maximum? Oh, by default, it wants to be a 1 on the maximum of the slider. And so you end up with something just that tall. If I want it, I can make that longer, and I cranked it up to 4. And you can see over here on your particles that you end up with a nice fountain. But then I ended up actually making it short again, because on the actual patch, where the coins fall out, they fall into a tray about that far below them. So I just adjusted the life expectancy until they disappeared in the tray the way I wanted them to. So yeah, don't really need to do this. It's kind of an added thing, an added cool thing for your patch. But if you want to take this code and plug it in, it's not too hard. And in fact, I'll upload the code that you need to add to your money counter to do this. It's only like a couple lines of code, but we're just out of time at this point. So let me go back to the final thing. Slot machine class 3. I believe it's this one. Sure, save and quit. And so then I believe it'll be, this is the final one, what it looks like. And we're already 6 minutes over, but no, I saved over it. Oh well, I'll find it. Anyway, your homework is to add logic to what we had before. So figure out how to add 3 buttons with text to the slot machine and position them in the display area to add money to your bank by hitting a button. Right? You can make buttons for $1, $10, and $100. And then create chop execute DATs attached to those buttons that actually adds that amount to the bank. And then the chop execute DAT that was attached to the slot handle button, which we currently, the only code we have in there other than we have that one that's currently doing 2 things. It's playing that spin sound, and it's also saying if the amount is greater than 0, subtract 1 from the bank. You should move the spin sound down below that if it's greater than 0, subtract 1 to the bank, so that it doesn't play any spin sound unless you have money in the thing. But you also want to make it not activate unless you have money in the bank. And I gave you a hint. And so if there's no money in it, put please add money in the display area. So you'll have to add an else below that if, saying else print, or have a text. You can have a text top that says please add money in the please add money, and put that in the display area and disable it or make its text be black or something. And then when that else activates, it makes it white or enables it so that you see the message please add money. And then and I gave you a hint about how to make these wheels either work or not. Based on it, you'll need to change the input into spinner 1, 2, and 3. Spinner 1, 3, and 3 to be driven by a constant instead of directly from that button, and have that chop execute send a 1 to that constant as long as there's money in the bank. Otherwise, don't send a 1 to that. And then that will make that work. So give this your best shot. Shay's here to help you. I'm here to help you. It's not too hard, I think, to do this. I just wanted you guys to be able to actually try something where you have to actually do it and not have me walk you through it with doing some logic. And then if you want to, you can customize the sounds. You could even add extra sounds, like maybe if you don't have any money and you try to pull the handle, it adds some kerchunk sound where the handle doesn't want to move. Maybe add a sound where the handle does move. You don't have to, though. But as long as you do this thing with the adding money and the not running if there is no money, then you've done the homework. The other thing is, sorry we're over time, but we didn't get a chance to talk about the final project. I want you guys to give me a final project proposal next week. So again, you have to do a final project in this class. The final project is going to be whatever you want it to be. The only requirements for your final project is A, it has to be done in TouchDesigner. B, I have to approve it. And I usually approve 90%, 99% of what people want to do, because you guys don't generally want to do something that's super simple. You want to do something that's a little bit challenging, right? So as long as you have some level of challenge that I feel is acceptable, I'll approve it. If you try to do something that I'm like, there ain't no way you're going to be able to do that, I might say you might want to scale it back a little bit, right? But just give me a proposal next week along with the other homework that says, here's what I'm thinking for my final project, and we can talk about it. 90% of the time, it's whatever you propose is fine. I want you guys to do something that you're interested in. Okay? Make sense? Great.